That's really depressing statistics, but it's really important. This is a heavy topic. It's going to pop up here in just a moment. We're going to be talking about trauma, what it is, who it affects, and what we can do about it. Okay? So I wanted to start with a positive slide there. Women are powerful. Women are powerful. In this room, we have the ability to we can create healing in our community, in ourselves, in our families. So the statistics we're going to give you and the things we're going to talk about are heavy. So they're also hopeful. There's a lot of hope in this presentation. So before we get started, what I want to do is I want everybody to join me in a nice deep breath. Okay? Put your hands on your belly. Okay? Everybody close your mouth, even if you're talking and eating. And take a nice deep breath through your nose. Hold it for a second and then release it. You should kind of feel your stomach rise when you breathe through your nose. We're going to do one more. And then deflate when you let that air out. Okay? So we're going to get started talking about this. And Becca told you what I do. And I've done it for a very, very long time. And today I want to talk about trauma. And we're going to get started with the first slide. Okay. So when you hear about PTSD, everybody's heard about this. We normally think of war. We think of, oh, somebody came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, they have PTSD. You know, in the old days, they called it battle fatigue. They called it shell shock. They called it a lot of things because people were exposed. They were in abnormal situations and they developed coping skills and responses to them. And sometimes when we talk about trauma, people will say, oh, I don't have trauma. I don't have PTSD. That's not what this is about. Because they think it's this very big, dramatic trauma. And what we're really talking about is we're gonna read this definition. Trauma is when we experience very stressful, frightening, or distressing events that are difficult to cope with or out of our control. It can be one incident or an ongoing event that happens over a long period of time. We have Lake Superior here. We know about erosion. We know what waves do. And you think, oh, it's beautiful. The lake's beautiful. But the lake eats away. So trauma, long-term trauma, causes that kind of erosion in our sense of well-being and our sense of safety and our health. Okay, and I'm gonna give you the science behind it because sometimes people think about, they're like, oh yeah, I had a crappy childhood. It wasn't traumatic. Like that's in the past and it's gone. But it's important to realize it takes a toll. Whether we talk about it, whether we recognize it or not, it happens. So we'll go ahead and slide. Anybody ever heard of this? I got a few people. Okay. So adverse childhood experience study, that's what this is. So this happened a long time ago, 1995 to 1997. There was an HMO in California, Kaiser Permanente, and what they wanted to do was, there was a really big push to lower healthcare costs. They're like, we're spending too much money, right? So they wanted to kind of address chronic health issues like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, all kinds of things that cost them a lot of money. So what they did was they had a wellness program started. They were going to address these things and give people options, resources to learn about it and intervene. And so in this study, it was a very large study, and I'll tell you some more about it on the next slide. But there was a group of women, a large group of women, primarily women, who they were dealing with obesity. And so the doctors, Dr. Robert Aaron and Vince Felitti, they realized there were some commonalities here. And they said, they couldn't make sense of this. And doctors care about research and they care about statistics. So like these women could get the intervention. They could hook them up with a dietitian. They saw a dietitian. They started exercising. They started doing all the things they needed to do to address their health, to lose weight. And they did. And they did. And they gained it right back. Okay? And they said, this doesn't make sense. What's going on? There's got to be some commonality. And they couldn't find one that was obvious. Oh, they're all of a certain ethnic group, or they're all of a certain age, or they're associated socio-demographic. They're a certain social class. None of that. So they decided that they would dig in and they would find out, is there something that happened in these women in their childhood? Is there something that we can find, just a common thread, because this doesn't make sense, every one of them. So what they did is they created a study. They came up with some questions and they wanted to ask about, what was your childhood like? What was it like when you were growing up? And they found that almost every one of those women, a huge percentage of them, had been sexually abused. They had experienced sexual abuse. And they were like, wow, maybe we're on to something. So we better start asking some questions. This is the ACE survey. I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of small. And so what we want to talk about, they sent this out to over 17,000 people. 17,000 people. This is a pretty big group. This is a big scientific study. So here's the questions. I'll read them to you. We have those surveys will be available if anybody wants to fill them out on their own. But they are, before the age of 18, did you experience any type of abuse? Emotional, verbal, physical, or sexual? Did you live with a parent who had a substance use disorder? Alcoholic mom or dad? Did you live with a parent who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? Did you lose a parent to death, divorce, or incarceration? Did you witness domestic violence? Were you neglected? Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special? So there's 10 questions. With each one of those questions, you get a number, and you come up with an ACE score. And when we start to look at those, we think, yeah, but that was a long time ago. That doesn't impact me. I've moved on. I don't think about it. Okay? So they're really common. They're really common, and they come in categories. So we'll hold this slide for a second here, so you can see they're divided. So household dysfunction, if there's substance abuse, we don't call it that anymore. We call it substance use disorder. It's on this slide, but parental separation or divorce, mental illness, battered mothers. We also don't call it that anymore either. Criminal behavior, neglect, emotional neglect, and physical neglect. And then abuse, emotional, physical, sexual. Sometimes people will say, yeah, I got hit. And my mom and dad would slap me, pull my hair, they would do those things. And that's what they did back then. Let's make a differentiation. Let's differentiate between a spanking and a beating and being hit, right? So physical abuse is a whole lot different. So what we know is, what do children need to grow and thrive? What do they need? They need safety first and foremost, right? And they need stability. And so that brain's developing even in utero. So we can even show you that if mom, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. My dad was alcoholic. He was an abusive alcoholic. And my mom faced domestic violence when I was in utero, right? So my brain came together with a lot higher stress levels. My mom was bathing in adrenaline and cortisol and stress. So the way my brain developed, when I was born, I came out loaded for bear. I have a higher chance of being depressed or anxious because that is even before I got to this earth, okay? So, and then when you live in that sort of situation, those higher parts of your brain, the part of your brain that is functioning, that is higher levels of functioning, executive function, learning how to regulate your emotions, learning how to bond with people. Those don't come on board very well when you're living constantly in chaos. Does that make sense? Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So there's a dose-response relationship. So they can show you that there's almost a tipping point. So if you have 0 ACEs, you're a lucky person. That's a rarity. If you have 1 ACE, but as they always travel together. They like company, right? So 1 ACE usually comes with another. So if you have a parent who struggled with mental illness, you might have struggled with substance use, right? Or Or if you have a parent who there was domestic violence in your house, maybe you also had incarceration and there was divorce. There was some things like that. So the trajectory, the higher the level, the higher the number in the ACE score, the more likely that you are to have physical, and I call it brain health. I don't like to call it mental health because your brain is literally in your body, and I don't like that separation. Mental health, there's a little bit of stigma with that. It is, we call it commonly, but it's really brain health. So your brain's impacted, and your body's impacted. So we give out the ACE survey sometimes, and we work in the jails. And I had a young man who told me, he took the ACE survey, he got 10 out of 10, and he laughed, dark humor, and he said, that's the only test I ever took in my life that I got 100% on. And I said, well, and he's in prison today. He's in prison today. And that's sad. We can tell you that most of the people that we have in our county jails and our prisons in long-term incarceration are the most traumatized people we have in our community, right? And how do we change that? How do we make a difference with that? So it's education, learning about this. And we're shifting from going from what's wrong with you? Why do you act that way? To what happened to you. Understanding that people carry some of those experiences in their body. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you want to talk about it, we carry it, right? So I'll give you an example. There was a young man in an alternative school, and he had a difficult time with one teacher. He was fine with everybody else, but this teacher would walk by his thing, and every time the guy walked by, and he said, no matter what I do with this kid, he literally wants to argue with me. He instantly becomes like combative or confrontational. And so what happened was he started seeing the school counselor. He had a stepdad at home who was beating his mom, right? Beating his mom. The teacher and the stepdad wore the same aftershave. So when that teacher walked by and he smelled that smell of our bodies, because we really are biological beings, right? We respond to that, and he was like the same fight, flight, or freeze happened to him when he would smell that teacher. Okay, we'll go back one, Becca. So these are the things that we know high ACE scores are there. We can attribute this to alcoholism, alcohol abuse, COPD. You'll see that smoking's over there. Coronary heart disease, depression, liver disease, violence, workplace violence, intimate partner violence, fetal death. Because remember, how our bodies work best is when they're at peace and calm, and we have that moment where we can just relax, right? So when we live at that high frequency hum of stress all the time, things start to break down. And in children, we often will say, this is ADHD, this is oppositional defiance disorder, without taking 5 minutes to see what's going on in this kid's house. You know, if you come to school and it's time for you to learn about biology, and you're worried the lights are going to get shut off, and Dad went to jail last night, and you went to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, the last thing that's coming into your head is biology. Because you can't learn, the part of the brain that we learn, that we use, is our frontal cortex, right? Where we're thinking up here. But if I'm living in constant fight, flight, or freeze, that's not the time to learn. That's not the time to learn. So with some of our clients, when they come in, and I'll give you most of the people I see don't want to see me. Nobody volunteers to see me. I'm a nice lady, but nobody wants to come to see me. They don't come to see me. People with drug and alcohol problems they're not driving down the road one day and they go, you know, I think it's time for me to stop drinking. Doesn't happen. We used to say in the old days, in the good old days, we said 4 things got people in our doors: livers, lovers, lawyers, and livelihood. So if you were sick, if your wife was kicking you out, if the lawyer said you better go get an assessment, get some help, or you're going to lose your job, that's why you came to see me. So nobody comes in wanting to see me. And so it's my job. They already come in ready to fight, right? So my job is to get them out of fight, flight, or freeze so they can actually learn something. Okay, and we'll talk about how we do that. slides up here. Fight, flight, or freeze. That cat looks really creepy. I just gotta tacitly admit that. I don't know. He's not AI, or maybe he is. I don't know. So, little mouse man, he gets chased by a cat. He is literally fighting for his life. He's not thinking about what he's having for dinner or what kind of cheese he had last night. He's literally like, I'm gonna die, right? So most mice are pretty big on flight. They don't turn around and box it out with a cat, right? So we do these things when we are threatened. We do these things when we are threatened. So we all have this. We all have this. And I'm going to tell you a story about how you know you have it. So have you ever been home alone? Okay, home alone and you hear something in the basement, you're like, what was that? And you're instantly, or you're walking down the stairs and you hear it, or you're in the woods and you hear something and you're like, you instantly stop, you either freeze, or you run like that, right? You're literally running. And what happens is, our bodies are designed to respond to a threat quickly, right? To save our lives. It's a survival mechanism. So we have to determine, is that cat going to kill me? It's a millisecond. Yeah, he's going to kill me, so I got to make a decision what to do. He's not deliberating. He's going, right? So we have that in our, with that quick snap, we're going to decide what we have to do. So we are designed to respond to the stress very quickly. Huge flood of cortisol, adrenaline, all the blood goes to your organs, your hands get sweaty, you're literally not thinking, you might get tunnel vision, and you respond to the threat. And then it goes away. And then you laugh and you're like, oh God, that was the neighbor's dog, you know, and it's funny. And so you're relaxed. So it goes up and it goes down, right? So horses, there's a reason the horse is here. So horses weigh between, I don't know, 800 pounds and 1,000 pounds on average. I had to look that up. My daughter wanted to ride horses. I am afraid of horses. They're big animals. They have big teeth. I don't trust them. They kick people to death. Not often. But for those of you who ride horses, I admire you. But I didn't want to transfer that fear to her. Because we hand those down. We hand those fears down to our kids. So she wanted to ride horses. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. Let's get you horseback riding, you know, lessons. And so she did that. And she was just a little tiny kid. She was like 8, maybe 9 years old. She went on a trail ride. And she was super excited. I was terrified. I'm like, oh no, here's where it goes bad. And she went on the trail ride. And the riding instructor assured her the horse was really calm. And it was really a safe thing. It would be really a good experience for her. But what ended up happening was I'm waiting at the barn for her. And all of a sudden, I hear all this thunderous galloping. And I look up, and this horse is beating feet to the barn, like whites of its eyes showing, running. And my kid's barely hanging on. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened, right? She comes flying to the barn. I'm scared she's going to fall off. And we get her in there, and the instructor's behind her, right behind her. And so I hug her. She cries a little bit because she's scared. I'm scared. And the horse is terrified. And I said, what the heck happened out on that trail? And I said, was there a coyote? Was there a dog? What the heck happened? And she said, a Walmart bag flew across. This is a 1,000-pound animal. And a Walmart bag flew across, and that horse was like, we're going to die, right? So turn around and run back. But this is what happens to trauma in the brain. When your brain is exposed to something where you didn't feel safe, you are constantly looking the surveying the landscape to see, is this a threat? Is this a threat? Is this going to hurt me? Are you going to hurt me? Are you going to pull out the rug from under me? And you're in that constant level of stress. So remember when I talked about fight, flight, or freeze, heart beating, clammy palms, dry mouth? Anybody in here suffer with anxiety? Because that's what that feels like. That's what that feels like, where it's escalated. And it's like, it doesn't make sense, but there's some threat to me. There's some threat that I'm perceiving is I'm not safe. And people will tell me, I come from a long line of worriers. We worry about everything. We worry about everything. And I instantly want to know what happened in your family. Because that is not a when trauma changes your brain, this is what you live in, right? So we'll go ahead one. This is a really cool thing that happened here. We know that ACEs, the higher your number of ACEs, the higher your ACE score, the more likely you are to struggle with some things, right? Health, brain health, mental health, physical health, whatever you want to call it, it's likely to impact you. So, help me out here. So was this a year and a half ago? 2 years ago? Year? 2 years ago. We did the HOPE survey through an organization that Sue heads called Building a Resilient Copper Country. BARC, isn't that a great thing? We have a dog as our little, I don't know what you call it, mascot? Anyway, so we did this survey here, and almost 900 people filled out this survey. And so this is in our community, because ACEs are high in all communities that have one thing in common. They're made up of humans, okay? So our community is made up of humans, and we have ACE scores. So in this survey, we realized how common this is, how prevalent this is. So you'll see this, I don't know if you can read this, but it says 2 out of every 5 community members have struggled with their own use of alcohol or drugs. Okay? It's a big number. This number made me happy, this 93.7%. Almost 94% of the people who were surveyed believe that those who struggle with alcohol or drug use have a chronic disorder and need help to recover. It wasn't always that way. It wasn't always that way. We have the highest rate of people in prison and in jails in the entire world. Because what we did with alcoholism, with drug abuse, with mental illness, we didn't know what to do with folks, so we locked them up. We're like, okay, we're gonna lock them up. Because their behavior sometimes, it's out of control. It can be criminal, right? And I'm not saying anything against the law enforcement's important, and we need that. But we also need ways to keep people from going in and out and in and out of the revolving door and helping them so it stops, right? So mental health is that nearly 7 out of 10 people in our community have experienced a mental health condition. Depression, anxiety, bipolar. There's a whole host of them. Brains. Your brains are in your body, and sometimes they get glitches. 59.8% of our community has seen a mental health professional. So that's a good number. And it's really kind of surprising because our patient to provider ratio in this area is abysmal. It's terrible. In Ontonagon, I think it's one of the worst in the whole state of Michigan. If memory serves, I write a lot of grants, and I use these statistics because they're bad and they help prove the point that we need help here. But I think in Ontonagon, it's almost 5,000 to 1. Okay, that's terrible. So it's hard to get help when you need help. And what stops people from asking for help? Anybody have an idea? Why don't we ask for help when we're struggling? Pride, stigma, shame, yeah, insurance, yeah, availability. Where do I go? Where do I go to get help? We can go ahead, another slide. This is the most bleak slide I'm going to show you. This is what does not work, and this kills people. Shame and secrecy keep people stuck and keep people afraid, keep people isolated. I tell people every day that tackling this problem, if you're struggling with depression or anxiety or substance use disorder, is not a DIY project. And many, many people live here because they're afraid of judgment. So one of the things, sometimes when I'm talking to audiences, you folks are caring people and want to learn about this, but sometimes I talk to people who are like, oh, I don't believe all that crap. There are people who will say, so you had a bad childhood, that's in the past, today's a different day, you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Sometimes they don't realize that some of these folks don't even have boots, right? I don't know what straps they're gonna pull from. And so they'll say that's all, touchy-feely. I've been called a bleeding heart, which I'm a grace. I am a bleeding heart, so. But when I say that, here's what I want you to think, I told you this is going to be the bleakest slide, so I gave you a warning. I want you to think for just a little second or two about the worst experience in your life, a time where you were really hurting, you were really struggling, it was really difficult. And then I want you to think about if you had to keep it a secret. Couldn't tell anybody. Nobody. And then I want you to go one further. If you got brave enough to tell someone what you were struggling with, what was hurting, what your trouble was, you were judged for it. They said it was your fault. Or they just told you, quit it. Just stop it. That's what it feels like, to be trapped on that hamster wheel of addiction, or to be stuck in a mental health crisis where I'm afraid to come forward. This is what we need to change in our community, and this is what we are changing in our community, just by virtue of the fact that you're all still listening, nobody got up and left, nobody's heckling me, thank goodness. So, we'll go forward. These are ways we get it wrong with some of this trauma. What we do sometimes is we label them, that's just a junkie, those dirty junkies, those crazy people, those whatever. Nobody wants to be labeled, everybody wants to be seen, they want to be acknowledged for who they are, right? And thinking we know their answers, we try helping people, but we do it for them, not being seen or heard. I tell people, my favorite way to disarm someone when they come into my office and they're mad. I got a DUI, I barely blew over the legal limit, and I have to come see you, and I have to pay for this, and what are you going to do? I don't even know you, and I don't want to talk to you, right? Is I tell them right off the rip, you're right, I'd be just as mad as you are. And instantly it's like I'm listening to you. And so it also gives them an opportunity. I say, you're the expert on your life, believe it or not. The folks who get into my office, the folks I see in jail, are strong, resilient people. They're amazing. And they've been able to overcome so much that I've never faced. And so acknowledging that, let people tell their story the way they need to tell their story. Let them be heard the way they need to be heard. Okay? And then you'll know you're getting it right when you're listening to people. When they say this magic word, they go like this. You're listening very carefully, and so you tell them something, and they go like this. Exactly. And they're so relieved that you got the message that they sent. Okay? So we can get that. That's not, everybody in this room can do that. Okay, let's go forward. So we're going to watch this short video. This is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. You can see her name. I didn't have to read it, but she's really good. We're going to listen to her talk about how we overcome this.
The toxic stress response actually refers to the prolonged activation of our body's stress response, the release of all those stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and all of those things that go along with our stress response. And then also the ways in which that affects our bodies. Children are especially vulnerable to this repeated activation of the stress response because their brains and bodies are just developing. So high doses of adversity in children actually changes the way their brains develop. It changes the way their hormonal systems develop, their immune system develops, and even the way their DNA is read and transcribed. And those long-term changes are what we refer to as the toxic stress response. When we understand what happens in our bodies with the toxic stress response, and we understand that it's that prolonged activation of our stress response, then step one is really understanding what are the things that have to regulate our stress response. And immediately at that point, we begin decreasing the harm that happened as a result of our past experiences. So things like mindfulness, right? Meditation, spending time in nature, mental health interventions, friendships, regular exercise, nutritional strategies, and my favorite, healthy relationships. All of these things are really scientifically demonstrated to help to regulate the biological stress response, and they improve our outcomes for those of us who have experienced these. These nurturing relationships, they feel good, which is good, of course, but they literally change our biology. When we have safe, stable, and nurturing relationships in our lives, it improves our neurologic functioning, it improves our hormonal regulation, it improves our immune functioning, and these social supports are a critical part of healing. If we all understand our role in being a source of buffering care to a young person in need, that is truly transformative. ACEs are not destiny. Even if someone has experienced significant ACEs, it doesn't mean that they are absolutely going to have these negative outcomes. Recognizing our ACEs requires us to recognize our vulnerability. And that can be really scary. But it also is the place where we get a chance to ask for what we need. I deeply believe that we can cut ACEs and toxic stress by half in one generation.
That's enlightening and hopeful. Except it was a little loosely, your lips were off a little, like a kung fu movie, So, this is what works. This is what works. There's some things you can do: massage, mindfulness, reflection, pleasure, doing things you love. We put them all on our little name tags. What a great, you got your own ideas. Biofeedback, movement, music, exercise and play, practicing connection, learning to settle down our parasympathetic nervous system, learning how to calm ourselves and soothe ourselves. That controls relaxation and calm and peace, right? Rest and digest. So sometimes people struggle with irritable bowel syndrome. They're like, oh, I come from a long family. We all have IBS. And again, I'm like, okay, was that nurture, nature, both, right? So this is what works. Connections, what we're doing here today. You practice a few things. We did the breathing, but every time you laughed at one of my dumb jokes, you practiced one of them, right? So, and you guys were good at it, so. We'll go ahead. One of my favorite authors is Brené Brown. She says, in the absence of love and belonging, there is always suffering. Relationships and connection are vital. From the time you want to be friends with someone when you're in kindergarten and you write the little note, will you be my friend? Check yes or no. You probably don't do that anymore. You probably text each other. But holding hands when you're in crisis, when things are rough, all the way to old folks who still do kiss, right? This is why we are hardwired for connection. And one of the ways we have stress in our life is when we're isolated. Because think about it, in caveman days, when God was out in his cave and he was with his clan or his tribe or whatever you want to call it, he needed his people for survival. It wasn't just if his caveman wife got mad at him and kicked him out of the cave. It wasn't just he had a bad night. He could have died, right? He wouldn't have shelter, he wouldn't have safety, he wouldn't have food. We are hardwired for connection. And so when that's absent, when that's missing in our lives, when we are isolated, there's always suffering. So we're going to go forward. Yep, the audio is going to go, and I'll tell you what it is before we play it. We're going to play an audio. It's a recording that we did in one of the jails, one of the Houghton County, oops, I already said it. I was going to say one of the county jails, it was Houghton County Jail. Okay, so, and I got permission, and I asked for a release of information from the women who were brave enough to talk to me. And I had to get the sheriff to agree to this, and I went down. This was was a one-time deal. They didn't have the questions ahead of time. They weren't prepped. They weren't saying, let's say this and let's say that. It was just a spontaneous, I brought my iPhone down and we recorded. And if the audio is good, we're gonna hear it. We'll listen to these women. Oh, wait. I know it's a little weird to record this, so we're gonna just have a little conversation here, if you guys are all okay with me recording it. Okay? All right. So we're at a county jail, and we are talking to 3 of the women that we work with in group, and we come in weekly. So what I really want to talk about is, I want you guys to have an opportunity to talk about, what do you think people don't understand about addiction? I think people don't really understand why it's not being forced. Right. The people, they give the worst advice I've ever heard is just stop it. Why don't you just stop it? Because that if it were that easy, nobody would be here. Nobody would continue using once they got in trouble. What makes it hard for women to ask for help? What do you think? What happened to children and stuff, they leave alone. What people are going to think about them as parents and stuff, and their kids taken away. Right, I think that's a huge thing, that people are afraid they're going to lose their, women in particular, moms are afraid they're going to lose custody of their children. Yeah. The big thing for me is like, all of my friends do drugs, and like for the longest time, like I didn't want to lose my quote-unquote friends, because it's really hard to bring your friends when you use together. Right. And then when you stop using, what happens? Then you're just sitting around by yourself and completely isolated and alone. So people need connection. Would you agree with that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. And so, what makes it easier to get help? What has helped you? Having resources. Like advertising. Right. Yeah, we've talked to people sometimes, and it's not until they're in treatment court that they even understand all the things that are out there. So, yeah, we've been coming in here for quite a while. We come in once a week. What do you like about, what makes you come downstairs and come to group? It helps the men to talk about things. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's like, you remember our conversations and everything, so like, shows that you actually care. Yeah, they're pretty good listeners. You come down here and we're feeling oh, yeah, that's awesome. We're glad to hear that. So, what do you think people need? What do you think women in particular need when it comes to recovery? Or what could help women get off the hamster wheel? You've all heard me talk about being stuck in the hamster wheel. So what can our community do? What can people in this area do to help women who are struggling with addiction? Shelter, evaluate, situation and stuff. Talk about it, not be judgmental. Yeah. Maybe really go at early with your head. Right. Working in the outreach to do it. Right. And education, public awareness. We have no interruption there. Yeah, that was like, I've never gone out and like looked for help. I've always been forced into it. But I mean, that's also the only way that's ever worked for me. Okay. Do you think that people can be forced to get help and get better? Well, it's more like, I don't like getting forced into getting help. It's more like getting forced to make that like connection with it. Like I get to rehab and then like, bring the body and mind involved. Yeah, I love that saying. That's a good one. So, what would you say to somebody who is struggling? What would you say to somebody who is still out there, still struggling with thinking next slide. Isn't that cool? That was not, we didn't script it. I promise you, I have witnesses in this room that will tell you. I want to show you this quote here. This came in that MARC survey, that HOPE survey. Everyone deals with mental health issues, either personally or with a peer, family circle. If we could work as hard together to bring that to light, rather than work that hard to appear okay, society could grow together. I think that's amazing. People need help and support. So, last slide. So, this is a shameless plug for us. This is our dream team. This is the folks at the health department that I work with. Every person in there. Sarah's like, that guy's so cute. Sarah gets to claim Casey. He's the only man in our crew. I think we've made him a better fiance, truthfully. So, we believe recovery begins with one positive connection, and that's what we do. If you're interested in getting involved, volunteering, or if you need help, there's a number up there you can call, and we would love to hear from you. But I have one last thing to do, and I have to introduce a special guest, and I get to, I'm going to give a bag to this person. I'm cherry picking the one I want to give. So, Cass, you want to come up? So, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to give her this bag, and I'm going to give her a hug. 3 years ago, Cass was one of those voices in jail. So she was on that recording, so she can tell you it wasn't scripted, and she can tell you she's here, and she can tell you why. And so let's give her a warm welcome. Hi. I just want to tell you a little bit about my story. So that recording was taken 3 years ago. I was in the county jail, waiting to go to prison. Back when I was a child, so that ACE test, I scored a 10 out of 10 on that as well. And I had a lot of childhood trauma. My mom was bipolar and alcoholic. I saw a lot of domestic abuse. So I grew up with feelings of like rejection, abandonment. I had a lot of emotional issues, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And there was, nobody really out there to support me. I ended up meeting my ex-husband. We had our first child when I was just 19, just barely out of high school. We got married, and then, growing up in all that chaos, I never knew what normal was. So as I went through my 20s and trying to raise my own children, I brought chaos because I didn't know normalcy. So when my second child I was pregnant with my second, my mother ended up being diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, and she passed away the day after my daughter was born, right down Aubrey on Portage. And although she was a mess, and she had her issues, she was my mom, so it obviously really affected me. My 20s were a really dark period in my life. I went through, addiction to everything. I was prescribed to 13 different medications at one point. Uppers, downers, all around. It was horrible. I was really depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. But I never gave up on myself, and I think that it was the things that I dealt with my mother and the way that I felt as a child pushed me to try harder for my own kids, so I never gave up. And I was in and out of treatment centers, in and out of jail. After age 25 was my first stint in jail, and I went to a secular rehab 5 times, and then I went to the Mission Bible Training Center twice, 7 times the charm. So I'm sober today, and I'm very grateful for it. It's thanks to the Lord, honestly, and to the healthy connections I made in the community. After that recording was made, right before that was when I finally broke down in jail, and one of the girls that was in that recording is the one that initially planted the seed of the Lord in me. I grew up knowing who Jesus was and everything, but I never walked, according to God's will. And she had given me the be still and know that I am God scripture, and I just broke down in jail one night, and I remember got on my knees and I said, Lord, help me, I can't do this. I had a dream that night, my mother was in it, and she looked just beautiful and healthy and happy and at peace, and she just told me to be strong and it's going to be okay, And I woke up the next morning and I just felt peace. And then I started deciding to go to their meetings at the jail, and it all kind of went from there. I'm really grateful for the healthy connections I made in the community and for the Lord. Couldn't do it without you guys or him, and Thank you all.